Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in and welcome aboard. And this is the Matthew Dark Show. Now, remember, however you get your shows, hit subscribe. Never miss an episode. Folks, this one's going to cut kind of deep, and we're going to get into some details and how this has just brought the judicial system right into your face. How could something like this happen? But it starts as simple as, sadly, as it is, millions of times in America where you have a divorce, kids involved, emotions are high, things end messily, and the wake of destruction. I think one thing we never take into account is the legal side of this and the potential obstacles and heartache and just time and just frozen nature of being in litigation and hanging over. Our guest is Shawn Young, and he's actually going through this as we speak. And as I was getting into the details of this case, it's kind of like worst nightmare come true in so many cases when you're held falsely, when you're accused falsely, when you feel like your rights have been stripped and there have no advocate. I mean, I can only think of a few nightmares worse than that, quite frankly. But of course, this involves divorce, custody, spousal dispute, and then the legal system. And so, Shawn, I wonder if you could just sort of bring us up to speed with your story and then kind of all the twists and turns that this has taken since the beginning, because this smells really, really nasty. But I'll turn it over to you, sir. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Yeah, as you've probably seen my stuff for the last few years, I don't know how much you've followed my stuff on social media or even at what point you came in, but basically I've been in this kind of fight for about 7 years, and never really understood the legal system, had never had to deal with court and deal with law enforcement or getting thrown in jail or just all of that stuff. I don't think a lot of people really understand it unless they live it, because it's so insane. And people that go through it, the stories are, there's a lot of similarities, but there are also a lot of differences too. And so really, unless you live it and go through it, I think it's really hard to even comprehend it, because you wonder if the person that's going through it is insane. And when you go through a messy divorce, especially if kids are involved and you're just watching your kids' life getting sucked out of them and just the pain that they're going through, and something that kids should never have to go through, and they're basically the biggest victims of bad divorces, which, whether you're a mom or a dad going through it, it kills you watching your kids getting wrecked.
Take us there, if you will. You're going along as a father, a husband. You're moving along. This is about 2019, if I go back in the math, and divorces essentially come upon the marriage, and it starts there, and it gets messy. Give us kind of a description there on what's now led us into such a just volatile legal process ever since.
Well, so it was at the end of 2018, and I'd been married for 12 years. And we were living in Alabama as a family. Me and my ex-wife were both from Utah, born and raised Mormons. And basically I went out to Alabama in 2013, and my dad gave us the opportunity to run a house flipping business and manage rental properties, and really live a dream life, just that whole real estate world. And he funded the whole thing, and just a huge opportunity. And the first 3 years I traveled back and forth, so I was 6 months out of the year away from my family, because my ex didn't want to leave Utah and leave her family and go all the way to Alabama. And so after 3 years, the business was going great, and I didn't want to be apart from my kids and my wife. So I basically said, come to Alabama and be a family and help me with this, or I'm going to divorce you, and kind of forced her hand. And so she said, okay, well, I'll come to Alabama for a year or two. And she came out. It was great. The family thrived. The business was going great. And after about 2.5 years, she was angry because it was longer than her 1 to 2 year period that she had agreed to, and she wanted to be back in Utah and back with her family. So there was constant friction that I had basically built this life in Alabama away from Utah. And in my mind, I'm thinking, we live in a mansion on a golf course. You stay at home with the kids. Our kids are very involved in the community. We were very involved with the Mormon church out there. And I thought, this is really a great life. Um, and so since we are having problems, I told her to go back to Utah, go be around her family. And that was at the end of 2018. She basically came back to Utah. Her family was upset over the years that I had taken them to Alabama. They got in her ear. They basically told her all the reasons why she should divorce me. And then just this nasty divorce broke out. And I think in divorce, the way a woman gets the upper hand is through false allegations. Um, yeah, that's basically it. And so once she started making false allegations, going to the police, bringing the courts involved, it just gets really messy. And I think when you have a person that has people around them pushing them down that path, it's kind of a path of no return, and they can't really turn back from it, especially when they start making false allegations. And so it just kind of snowballed and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And yeah, I don't think that she planned on it getting as nasty as it got. It just kind of went down that path. And as it was happening, I couldn't believe the insanity of it. And I um, tried to go to the local media, tried to explain to people what was happening. And eventually I went and got on social media and started telling the story because nobody in the local media cared to share the story or talk about it. And I was just so shocked at what a broken system and how kids could be taken from such a good life and completely ripped away from a father. And yeah, so I don't know, that it just blew
That's
my mind.
that puts us to now. She leaves Alabama. Divorce proceedings begin. It was getting ugly. This eventually leads to a no contact order, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of what then sets us off into some kind of legal labyrinth that you still find yourself in. I guess give us that moment. And how could you find yourself in this position and be falsely accused and have really nowhere to turn?
Mm-hmm. Well, so all of 2019, once she got back to Utah, um, I was basically trying to reconcile. And all my adult life, I've been a gambling addict, high stakes gambler. That's kind
Mm.
of my biggest weakness, my biggest problem. Of course, growing up Mormon, being involved in the Mormon church, you're not allowed to gamble. I would drink from time to time, smoke weed from time to time. All those things are big, you don't do.
Yeah.
And so as I was trying to reconcile, jumping through all the court hoops, going to counseling, just doing everything that they wanted, she was kind of playing both sides because she kept saying she wanted to come back to Alabama, she wanted to reconcile, but then she was telling her family and the court something different.
Mm.
And so basically, she flew back to Alabama, spent some time out there, told everyone she was coming back with the kids in July of 2019. And then I came back in August of 2019 to get them. And there was some, I guess, arguments between me and her parents. And she's like, if you're not good with my mom, I'm not good with you. And I just said, okay, well, I'm not. I've been dealing with your mom for 12 years, and you got to pick me or your mom. Your mom can't be involved in our marriage. And so at that point, I just said I'm done, and I'm moving on. I've tried for the last 10 months to fix this, and it's unfixable. And so at that point is when she started, making false police reports and false allegations, and even false rape allegations, and just that was the path.
And they move on it from there, from a police department perspective, a local prosecution. And then, so now you, at that point, though, this begins, you have separation from your kids at this point now, too. You are not allowed to be around or speak to them.
Well, so in February of 2019, in the very beginning, she basically went. So she left Alabama December 2018. 3 months later, I said, okay, you got to come back to Alabama. It's been 3 months, it's been enough time. And she said, I'm not ready. And so I went to a divorce attorney and sent her the receipt of the consultation. And 2 days after that, in February, I got served with a protective order.
Okay.
And basically mutual friends. Her sister said she has an LDS services counselor, which is basically social services within the Mormon church, that told her to get the upper hand in a divorce, she needed to get a protective order against you. And so the kids and the protective order that went in place early on. I think April 1st is when the initial protective order went in place. And those protective orders expire after 150 days if you don't have a hearing with findings that shows real abuse or that you're a real threat to your kids. It automatically expires because they want you to get into family court, put a custody agreement in place, and you know, the idea is they don't want women to abuse the protective order courts
Yes.
to keep the kids from the fathers is the idea. But
You've made no threats. There's nothing recorded that would put anybody's life in danger, and they're proceeding with a no contact protective order. And then that's expired, but yet it was the bases of these future charges. Is that fair to say? I mean, you said 150 days expiration, which means this has now moved on beyond some kind of immediate danger, risk to anybody. I guess we've cleared the air there. So then it takes some tricky prosecution, though, to take a expired protective order and give it the lifespan. We saw that in the Trump cases where they manufactured cases, misdemeanors to felonies, and expanded statute of limitations.
mm-hmm.
And they picked up from there. Is that accurate?
Yeah. So initially, it was April 1st of 2019 when they put the protective order in place. And my experience is, and what I've witnessed with other people is, if a woman goes to the system and says, I fear of this guy, there's never been any past violence, there's never been any past police reports that can show any violence or any threat, the system will just give a woman a protective order, whether it's legit or not.
Right.
And so in April of 2019, we were doing marriage counseling, and within 2 weeks, the counselor basically fixed the issues, and she was ready to drop the protective order. So in June of 2019, we went back into court. She took herself off the protective order, but left the kids. And that's why she ended up being able to go to Alabama and seeing me in July. But once she got
and that was done by intent by her. I mean, there was some kind of motivation there, or was that just a clerical error in the process? Well, meaning if the protective order had expired on one and not the other, was that by intent to leave it attached to the children at that time? You said she left that on there. Was that intentional, or was that some kind of clerical unwinding that needed to be done?
No, basically, when we went into court in June, she had told me she was going to remove the kids and remove herself off of it. And we went in, and the kids had a guardian ad litem that represented them. And the guardian ad litem said, no, the kids need to stay on. She can come off, but the kids need to stay on it.
Okay.
And so, but as far as to go back to your question, just when they changed it or these recent charges is, I believe that when my ex-wife makes, because she made probably at least 15 different false police reports, is she would pull out a protective order and pretend like it existed even when it wouldn't. But the police officer or the detective or the prosecutor, all these people involved, they don't do their homework. They don't know what they're doing. They don't want to do any work. They take her at face value of whatever she says. And I think a lot of these people are just so lazy, and they have so many cases, and they just don't even treat us like we're human beings. And it's just,
right.
Yeah.
So she knew it was expired or no longer valid and continued to present it as a valid document. That's fair. Exactly. So that's intentional. That was to gain. Okay, I'm there now. So this goes into effect. Bring us up to where you eventually are held in jail for this. Get us into those moments of how this could escalate to confinement and something we're still dealing with today.
Yeah, I mean, it all sounds so unbelievable. So at the end of 2022, so she leaves at the end of 2018. She files for divorce July of 2019. And we get to our divorce trial that's scheduled at the end of 2022. I had moved to Las Vegas in 2021. So I came to Utah for the divorce trial in 2022, and I found out that I had three pending charges against me. Um, One was she had a new boyfriend, which was the best friend of her sister's third ex-husband. Her oldest sister's been divorced 6 times.
Wow.
And so he was in Nevada, about 30 minutes from where I lived in Nevada. And he was putting my kids all over his Facebook page, traveling with them, doing all these things. And I wasn't getting my monthly 8 hours of visitation, my weekly FaceTime visits all stopped when this guy came in the picture. And so I sent him a message on Instagram saying, hey, I don't care what you do with my wife. I've moved on from her, but I'm worried about my kids and I'm worried about you having overnight visits with my two young daughters. Um, and so I was charged with a felony for sending that message, where I was a Nevada resident, he was a Nevada resident, but Utah claimed that they had jurisdiction. And and then I reached out to the school, and I
What was
reached
the
out.
crime there? What was the crime when you did the Instagram messaging? What was the crime?
They said that it was for violating a protective order. Um, well, that one actually. So there's so much here. So
Right.
going back to 2020, um, I did plead guilty to what they call a stalking injunction, which is very similar to a protective order.
Right.
And that's a whole other story in itself. But um, in that stalking injunction, it basically said I wasn't able to ever contact anybody that my ex-wife knows. And
Mm,
so I was basically violating that, is what that crime was.
got it.
And then when I reached out to the kids' school and the kids' bishop, just because I had all the court ordered contact that I was supposed to be getting with my kids, I wasn't getting. And so I was just concerned as a father, because I reached out to the local police department, told them my concerns. They laughed at me. They wouldn't do a
Sure.
welfare check. And I just wanted to know my kids were alive and that they were okay. So I got charged with a felony for reaching out to the school, felony for reaching out to the bishop, and a felony for reaching out to the guy. And so I go back to Utah in 2022 for the divorce trial, and I go to a local attorney. He says, "You've got these three felonies. You need to deal with this." And I've got the divorce trial starting on Monday. We voluntarily go in on Friday to an initial appearance on criminal court, and they take me into custody and
Wow.
hold me for 41 days, no bail, based on for those three charges. So it basically made it so I couldn't prepare for the divorce trial. The divorce trial got rescheduled for 6 weeks later. I get released from jail December 8th. It starts December 12th. I'm representing myself pro se in the divorce trial. Um, so
I
that
want to
was
remind our listeners real quick there what you just said, held 41 days without bail on a charge that, come to find out should have never existed in the first place. Just to put that in context and perspective, those savages, those monsters in Cincinnati that stomped out the white couple at the jazz festival, they were released the next day, one of them for a $400 bail. Just to put those offenses in perspective, that's breathtaking. So it's December. You're now entering December 12th, the divorce trial. Go.
so we have the divorce trial, the 12th, 14th, and 15th, I believe, and then it gets extended out to I think March 2nd and 3rd. So it was a 5 day, and it's just the custody portion. And when I was released to jail, I had to get an ankle monitor and the only reason I got released from jail is going into the preliminary hearing at 41 days. My attorney tells me, he says, Shawn, the prosecutor's not ready to do the preliminary hearing. If you waive your right to a preliminary hearing, he'll let you out today with an ankle monitor. But if you don't, you're going to sit in jail for at least 9 months to a year.
Wow.
And I said, I'm not going to waive my right to a preliminary hearing. If they're not ready, this is beautiful. Let's go in. Let's tell the judge we're ready, make the state look like fools.
Yeah.
And basically, that's what we did. And I was released, but I was told if I didn't agree to waive my right, then I was going to be held in jail for 9 months to a year. And I'm going,
Under what basis, though, other that you could be held without bail for a crime of this level? I mean, did they ever give you any special circumstances as to why you could be held like this?
what blew my mind is I'm going, don't I have, under the Constitution, don't I have a right to a speedy trial within 60 days? And they're like, oh, no, that doesn't exist in Utah.
Oh,
And another thing that attorney, and his name's Jeremy Diaz, he's a very well, high up there guy. If you
yeah.
were to look him up, he takes a lot of high profile cases. But another thing he told me a couple weeks before the preliminary hearing was he says, Shawn, I've got a way to get you out of jail. I know how we can fix this. He says, if you'll tell them that you're a drug addict and you go into a drug treatment center, it's going to take you 9 months to a year to complete. The first 3 months, you got to be inpatient. But if you do in this whole, I'm a drug addict, I got a problem, basically bow down and apologize and say you
Right.
need help. After you complete this program in a year, they'll dismiss the 3 felonies. And I'm like, dude, I don't have a drug problem.
Yeah.
I'm going into a custody trial trying to get rights to my kids. Why would I say I'm a drug addict and I've got a drug problem? That makes no
Exactly.
sense. And
Zero.
he's like, just pretend like you are, and since you're not a drug addict, it'll be super easy for you.
Oh my
But
gosh.
it's basically once you have a target on your back with the system and they're coming after you, if you don't submit, if you don't bow down and tell them exactly what they want to hear, then they just intensify everything and come at you that much harder. And what I always believed was you have an attorney that represents you. There's a prosecutor that is basically the state, and then you have a judge that is the middleman, that's indifferent to everything. But my experience in Utah is you've got prosecutors that completely own the judges. The judges don't even know what they're doing. They just do what the prosecutor wants. And then basically you have your attorney who's just trying to manipulate you and get you to take some crappy plea deal that's going to allow the system to sink its teeth into you to where you're on some sort of probation that's going to ultimately make you fail. And then people just are stuck in this hole and they can never get out of it.
As it stands right now, you are still on GPS ankle.
I
You're in the 24/7. You cannot leave your home.
Correct.
No travel available to you.
Correct.
And so again, these are still from that original 2022 kind of timing and on the beginning. This is still being imposed to you. And can you tell our listeners, being right now, this is a 7-year process, 600 plus days of some kind of confinement. Do you know what you are actually, why this has been treated like this? What is so special about your crime that would be treated like no other in its classification? I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm just stunned, I'm blown away how they haven't gotten caught doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe it's just a big club of people, and all the attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges are basically all the same people, the same families, the same friends. They all go to law school together. They live in the same neighborhoods. They go to the same churches, and they all just protect each other. They
Right.
know there's no due process. They all take an oath to the Constitution, but none of them follow it, and they make so much money. So when I got out of jail November 6th, and we haven't even gone into that, but where I was held in jail for 237 days before I finally got out to home confinement, which is where I've now been for almost 9 months. Um, basically, um, and there's so much that my head
Well,
kind of
take it. Well,
spins.
just do this. Take us then to the actual imprisonment, because you
Hmm.
get out and you actually do spend time, and this is like a county jail. I mean, get us into that to where you're actually in prison for this.
Well, so, and I'll back up. So, the reason why at the end of 2022, when they let me out to an ankle monitor, the reason why I had an ankle monitor for 111 days was because the state's first available time to do a preliminary hearing was 111 days later. Whereas, and they have the rules of criminal procedure says you do a preliminary hearing within 14 days if you're incarcerated or 28 days if you're out of jail. And so that's what's funny is when you go to the legislator and you point out all these flaws in the judicial system, they say, it's so broken, it's so corrupt. We don't know even where to start or even what to do to help.
That's
And I'm
terrifying.
going, there's rules of criminal procedure that they're not following that you've all put in place. So why don't you just make them follow that? There's the rules of professional conduct that say how attorneys are supposed to treat their clients. If they don't follow that, then hold them accountable. There are all these things put in place that if there was just an accountability piece, that would change everything, but there's just zero accountability in all of it. But
Jeez.
and so to go back to March of let's see, 2023, when I went to the preliminary hearing finally.
Yes.
So those three charges, the school went away because they wanted nothing to do with it. And
Right.
now it just became the boyfriend and the church. But then they added 7 additional felonies for just my social media posts. So now it turned into 9 felonies. But the judge at that point allowed me to have the ankle monitor taken off with no restrictions. So I'm going, so there's 9 felonies, but now you're just going to let me free.
Opposite. Yeah.
Um, and so, but at that point, I had done the divorce trial. It was done. I saw it was a hopeless cause. I saw there was no way I was going to get any rights to my kids. And so I told the criminal court judge, his name's Judge Hogan, I said, this has all been just meddling in the divorce, trying to erase me as a father. You guys won. I've got this beautiful new lady that I'm with. I'm going to move out of Utah. Well, at that point, I already lived in Las Vegas, but I'm going to move on with my life, and I'm done. I'm out. You guys won, so just leave me alone. And that turned into a year later from that. Well, at the end of that year, so at the beginning of 2023, February of 2023, I ended up losing all contact and communication with the 3 kids. And I just say, I'm done. I don't want them seeing these woke counselors having their lives disrupted. After 4.5 years, there's so much disruption that if I were them, I would hate me too, because
Yeah.
it's just constant chaos in their life. And so at the end of that year, 2023, I'm getting attendance records because through the divorce decree, I get attendance records or school records and medical records. And that's when, and I'll just read it.
Yeah.
Basically, the principal sends me the attendance records in November, and I say, thank you, Lori. With the holidays coming up and my daughters being erased from my life as of February of this year, would you be willing to go see them and tell them I love them and give them a hug for me? Also, is there any way I could have flowers or packages delivered to the school and given to them? Based on my ex-wife's testimony in our court hearings, she testified that Charlie, who's my middle daughter, was suicidal, and since then they ended all contact and communication between me and my 3 kids. I'm very concerned about them, but especially Charlie. She was manipulated and brainwashed the most by my ex, and seeing how much school she's missing makes me even more concerned. Thank you and God bless you for sending me the attendance records so I still know my kids are alive and in Utah. And
Wow.
so a few days after that, I'm talking on social media, lamenting about how wrong it is that I have no contact or communication with my kids, that the school isn't willing to just tell my daughters that I love them and let me send a gift to the school. Um, and my ex, who stalks me endlessly, gets on my social media. She sees me say that. She calls the police, makes a police report, and basically the detective with the West Jordan Police Department, along with the Salt Lake County prosecutor, get together. They inflate charges. They don't actually file charges until February of the next year of 2024. And they basically file a third-degree felony for domestic violence, saying I violated a protective order. And the alleged victims are my ex-wife and my 2 daughters. And so my ex-wife is basically saying that email caused her emotional damage.
Right.
And so that's categorized as domestic violence.
Okay.
And so March 15th, which we did have some different court hearings. There was one, I think it was January 31st of 2024. They gave me 6 days notice. They wanted me back in Utah for a court hearing. Well, Dulce, who's my fiance or girl or whatever you want to call her, really my wife, basically,
Mhm.
she's set to have a baby any day. And she's in a high risk category. we're going to the doctor twice a week. She had had 4 miscarriages prior to this pregnancy.
Mm.
And so I was very involved going to all the doctor's appointments with her. We're super excited. It's her first baby. I'm super pumped about being a dad again. And they gave me 6 week notice to come from Vegas to
Mm.
Utah. And I get the doctors to write a letter saying, can you push this out? Can you do it virtually? The judge says no, he has to be here. I choose not to go back that day, and that's the day she ends up going into labor.
Wow.
And so she's in the hospital in Las Vegas. I'm doing the court hearing virtually, even though he said I couldn't, I jump on. But she's in labor. He makes me do an hour and 20-minute court hearing while we're having a baby. And so anyway, there was that one.
Wow.
And then I'm going crazy. I'm going nuts on everybody, telling them how screwed up they are. And he files a decorum order violation against me. And again, same thing. Schedules a hearing for March 8th. Says you've got 10 days to be in Utah. I'm like, I've got a 5-month-old son. We've only got one car. They both depend on me. I'm not coming to Utah. And he holds me in contempt of court like 10 different times, which is supposed to be 30 days in jail for each contempt and then $1,000 fine. But he waives all fines, waives any jail time because he says he doesn't want to put a burden on our new family. But he does issue 2 bench warrants. And then that new charge that had come out at the end of February, there was a no bail warrant on that one. And so he issues these warrants on March the 12th. On March 15th, Dulce finds a baby monitor on Facebook Marketplace. So I'm 40 minutes from the house going to buy this baby monitor. Achilles, our son, he's 6 weeks old. And I pull up to this house to get this baby monitor. And I have this truck that kind of curb checks the front of my car. It's a Nissan, or not Nissan, a Honda. And a guy rolls out of the driver's seat onto the hood and has a gun just pointed right at my face. And
Jeez.
I'm like, holy crap. And so they're, yelling my name, Shawn Young, hands up, and surround my car. And I find out it's U.S. federal marshals that teamed up with Las Vegas Metro PD. It's called a task force. And if I remember right, there were 6 of them. And I'm going, can I see a warrant? What's this about? They have no warrant. They don't tell me what it's about. They don't read me my rights, and basically take me into custody, put me in jail, and I get an attorney right away in Las Vegas, a guy named Tim Treppinger, and he's actually a conservative that ran for district attorney of Clark County and did very well for a low budget campaign, and he's going to be running again. But he's like, Shawn, I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Yes.
And we're going into court. Judge Goodman is the fugitive court judge in Clark County. He's refusing to give me bail because Utah won't give bail. And he says he'll just reciprocate what Utah does. So he completely violates all my rights. And extradition, the way it works, is they basically say this state wants you. If you'll voluntarily sign this piece of paper, then a 30-day time clock ticks. And if they don't get you within 30 days, we'll release you. And I'm like, well, I'm not signing a paper to voluntarily get taken over. And so they said, okay, well, then it's going to take 90 days. That's how much time we have to get the governor of Utah to basically request the governor of Nevada issue a governor warrant to take you. And so I basically fought that fight through that whole process, thinking at some point I would get bail every couple weeks. And that's the worst part when you're in jail is you're thinking every couple weeks you're going to get released, and then it's just you don't, and it's just a constant mind game. And I think that's the hardest part is when you're expecting something and then it doesn't happen. And so anyway, I
Mm.
basically fought that fight for 125 days. So it was 35 days longer than they told me it was going to take. They finally got the governor's warrant after a little over 80 days. So they basically held me in custody for over 80 days without ever showing a warrant, ever have any justification. And then once it finally got into district court under Judge Weiss, he was the one that made the ultimate decision. He's the presiding judge of Clark County courts, and he was like, this doesn't really make any sense. This doesn't look right. But the governors had more time to investigate this than I did. I'm just going to go ahead and do what the governors want.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so at that point, they allowed me to get extradited back to Utah. Once I got to Utah, I got an attorney named Ed Brass, who is probably in the top 5 criminal defense attorneys in the state, just because my dad did that for me. And as far as I could tell, he was just tried to sabotage the whole thing from the get-go. He wasn't getting me out of jail. He wasn't fighting for my rights. And basically, I was in jail for 124, 25 days in Nevada, and then another 112 days in Utah.
Jeez.
And once they finally released me at the preliminary hearing in November of last year, they realized my ex-wife was no longer a victim. So they took her off of it as being a victim. They took off the domestic violence component and they reduced it to a class B misdemeanor. And then now you just have a class B misdemeanor. And this is all for the email. So the extradition paperwork, all it shows is this newest charge. And it's all, the 8 months in jail, 9 months on house arrest is because I sent an email asking a question, wanting my kids to know that I love them.
When are they going to find out that that is null and void? Is that coming up, a moment of justice where, because there was no victim, that this must be dropped in the name of justice? I mean, is that carrot getting closer to us?
Well, the other thing about this is with this, there's been 3 different judges. So it's like they keep passing it off to the new guy because they know
I saw that.
up. And so they're constantly changing prosecutors, they're constantly changing judges, and they all just play dumb like they don't know what's going on. And for the most part, because like I said, the attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges are all friends and all basically working behind the scenes together. Well, so what I did is um, my attorney did ask 2 different times to dismiss the case just in the name of justice, like you said, and they basically refused to do it. And so I have an attorney. His name is Jordan Haycock. He works for the Attorney General's office now as a prosecutor.
Uh-oh.
He was my attorney in 2019 when all of this happened.
Right.
And so he confirmed when I got out of jail, he said, Shawn, that protective order fell off from your kids after 150 days, which it clearly says in the protective order. And he's like, if you want to do an evidentiary hearing, I'll go and I'll be happy to testify because what they're doing to you is completely wrong. And so he even showed up in court in February when we were having a hearing. He took my attorney, Ed Brass, aside. He took the prosecutor aside. He looked up the laws. He explained the laws to them.
Wow.
And I mean, the prosecutor wasn't happy about it. My attorney wasn't happy about it because it made him look like a fool.
Yeah.
But they still continued on with it. And so what I did is I went back to the commissioner, Commissioner Menas, who in 2019 issued the protective order. And the confusion is because my kids are listed as protected parties on the 2019
Yes.
order, but then in another spot in the protective order, it says it expires on November 8th, 2019, the civil provisions. And the way Utah law is written is the civil provisions and the kids fall off automatically after 150 days. And so I went back to him, represented myself pro se because I didn't have any faith in Ed doing anything.
Yeah.
And he confirmed. He said, yeah, they fell off after 150 days. You want me just to go ahead and take them off now? And I said, yes, please take them off. So that was March 18th. So now I've got an order that confirms they never should have been on it. They're
Yes.
currently not on it. And after that hearing, I sent it over to Ed. He says, okay, I'm going to get this dismissed right away. Then he disappears for almost 2 months and won't respond to my emails, my calls, all these things. He shows back up and goes, I'm really sorry. I've had sepsis. I've been on my deathbed. I almost died. And so at that point, I'd given up on him. And I ended up hiring these new attorneys, which is John Pierce and Andrew Green, which I'm super pumped about. John Pierce represented a lot of the January Sixers. Him
Yeah.
and Lynn Wood were kind of the main guys. So now I got some out of state, just high powered attorneys. They're all in on helping me. They fight a lot of conservative fights, which is very unusual for attorneys. And they're not a part of this whole club. And they were hired in May, but we've got a hearing coming up August 12th. We were supposed to have a hearing on a motion to dismiss that they filed June 2nd. But the prosecutor, we showed up to that hearing. The prosecutor, Chad Carter, was out on extended medical leave. And so they just rescheduled the hearing for 2 months later, which I don't know how, when we're ready, we show up, they can just,
Exactly. Sorry you weren't, you know?
so, at least they could have said, well, get off home confinement, go live your
Yeah.
life. This is our fault, but or have a replacement that can do it. But no, it's just everything goes on their timeline, and they're constantly just pushing everything out, and they're really just trying to wear you out,
Yes.
exhaust you, and destroy you mentally, which it does do.
But
But
that's what I want to hear, because this is like an almost 99.999% of people are never going to find themselves in this mess of a, I mean, all the moving pieces here, it's like, come on, this is a Hollywood story. It's not believable, right? It's got everything in it. But, you describe this being just an incredible spiritual and faith journey too. I mean, I just wonder if you'd give us some insight to, you know, I'm sitting here, worst nightmare come true. I'm living it every day, Groundhog Day, over and over. I mean, just sort of give us a glimpse of what that journey's been like spiritually, psychologically, and kind of how you've come to terms with it today.
yeah, I mean, so in 2019, um, like I told you, I was born and raised in Orem, Utah, born and raised in a Mormon church. Pretty much majority of my family, a lot of my friends, same thing. And so in 29 or 2018 and then 2019, when this was going on, um, as soon as my ex-wife knew that the divorce was going to happen and the relationship was over, she started calling everybody back in Alabama, in my church, in my neighborhood, and saying, I'm a meth addict, I'm gay, I'm seeing prostitutes, just everything she could imagine, because the month before she had told everyone she was coming back, bringing the kids back. So she needed some justification of why she wasn't. So she's making all these false allegations against me. So all the people in my church, all my friends, family, everyone's coming at me with all these allegations that my ex-wife's saying.
Mm.
So, and at the same time, I'm losing my kids. I'm having criminal charges thrown at me, one of which was rape allegations. They never turned into charges, but I had detectives calling and telling me that that was a thing that was in, could be a possibility. Um, so I just stopped talking to people for probably at least 6 months, and I was always, my daily routine was I would go to CrossFit in the morning, I would walk 18 holes of golf, then I would work in the yard for a few hours, and I was just always listening to music. And I ended up, you can leave the church. It's quitmormon.com, and basically you fill something out, and there's some just volunteer attorneys that'll send something to the church and take your name off the church record. And when this all happened, because my ex was such a strong, straight arrow Mormon, I was basically doing it to spite her, just to leave the church, because I knew it would piss her off at the time. And when I left, the bishop basically, um, he's kind of the leader of your church. He brought me into his office and said, Shawn, if you leave the church, you're not going to be protected by the covenant anymore. And, all these bad things are going to happen to you, kind of thing, which I actually really like the guy, Bishop Brad, or not Bradshaw, Bishop Thornton. Was a great guy, and I have a lot of respect for him. But a few months after that happened, and then I'm in this world of just on my own, kind of detached from society, and just basically crippled and kind of paralyzed as a human
Broken.
being. Not being able to sleep, my mind was racing so much, just all these different things. It really brought me to my knees, brought me to prayer, and I was really just comforted in that moment through prayer. And I mean, it's hard to get a real overall picture of everything in such a short conversation,
Yeah.
and there's so many more pieces to it. But the fact that I survived it, the fact that I was just able not to kill myself as I went through it,
Yes.
um, and then I didn't do social media the first 34 years of my life, mainly because when I did get on, when Facebook came out, around 21 years old, that's when I was with my ex-wife. And then I had these ex-girlfriends reaching out to me that were just friends, really.
Yeah.
Made her super jealous, super pissed. So I just thought, I don't need this in my life.
Fair.
Um, but I ended up getting on social media to tell this story. And when I was doing it, the Hodge twins, they basically were constantly putting me on their page and really helping to get me exposure. That was kind of the 2020.
Yeah.
But it made me get involved in politics. And once I realized the government could just take my kids from me, they could just throw you in jail when they want, they could basically just take over your life. All of a sudden, now I cared. And so I became a huge Trump supporter, and just got really involved in all that.
Mm.
But yeah, back to your question is when I really needed help, even when I wasn't making the best life choices, I wasn't this great guy. I could get on my knees, I could pray, and I could get comforted by God when I
Yes.
needed it. So I'm a very big, firm believer in prayer, and God will help anybody that wants His help if we just get on our knees and pray. And religion has absolutely nothing to do with having a connection to God.
Amen.
You know?
That's just so well said. And it's like, you know, you go back to it, at your lowest moment, darkest moment, you could have killed yourself. You could have destroyed yourself. And you sought the Lord and you sought, and you've made it through. And that's the testimony. That's the power of a testimony like that. That now look at what you can accomplish. I always hear stuff like this, stories like this, and say, that would have broken me to nothing. I don't know that I would have had it, but it can be done. And so that's that encouragement, that gift of just an incredible test. And I encourage people, where's ways they can follow you, support you. They're going to be interested in this and kind of want to see, happy ending come through. What's a way our listeners can connect with you?
Um, so it's kind of been crazy because I was very outspoken against the COVID vaccine
Mm-hmm.
in the very early stages. All the woke crap, basically all the crap from the left, I've been outspoken against. In a big way. Even it seems like it's kind of the norm now, but
Right.
in 2020 there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it,
True.
or we were just being shut down. And so I think I've probably had 30 Instagram pages deleted.
Right.
I've been kicked off. I thought Twitter was going to be a good one, but I joined at the beginning of the year, got a premium membership, and then after a month I got kicked off of that one. TikTok, I had some different decent accounts, got kicked off of there. So I really only have one page left, which is Utah Corruption on Instagram.
Okay.
And just to go back, as I have done this on social media, and maybe you had similar experience, what's been interesting to me is when you kind of put yourself out there, when you share your story, when you're an open book, so many people reach out to you with similar experiences and share their experiences as well. And so, people killing themselves, people going to addiction, people ending up in prison, they go kind of on this journey that I've been on.
Yeah.
That happens a lot more than people think.
Yes.
And so for me, just by not quitting, by continuing to try and better myself, just do as many good things as I could, even with all the insanity and all the hardship at the end of that road, now I have a beautiful fiance. Tomorrow, our son turns 18 months old.
Awesome.
I've got, when you go through things that should break you, that should kill you, you really find out who your true friends are, who your true family is. And to me, I think a lot of times in life, people never really get to find the people that love them unconditionally. And that might be the greatest blessing when you go through something like this. And so, anyway, that was just another point.
It's so well said, brother. And it's so encouraging to see this turn out well. Because like you said, people live on the streets after something like this happens to them. People never get out of prison again. So you've hit it on the head and been a light to where, adversity, you think you having a bad day, check this out, right? So it's always the gift of perspective that you have now, the encouragement to continue, that it gets better. And you just pointed out the gratitude in your life, all the blessings you still have in your life, even with this mess going. We'll get show links in there. We want to follow you, support you, be praying for you and this outcome, but we're going to want to have you back when this has some great resolution. And brother, we'll just stay connected, but thank you so much for coming on, sharing sharing this story. It's really fantastic. We're going to force some traffic and support there, but I hope and pray all this turns out so good for you and your family, and maybe reunite with your kids in a great way. You just don't know what the Lord wants to put in your life now that you've been faithful during the fight, and can only grow more in them. So we'll have you back. And folks, do this until next time. Serve God, help others, stay good. Goodbye. God bless everybody.
The Matthew Dark Show, your one-stop show for truth, courage, fellowship, and faith. Available everywhere you get your podcasts.